Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Camille Fetter. I'm the founder and CEO of Talentfoot Executive Search. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very special event. I know we are all juggling the chaos of December, so thrilled to have you with us today. Today is the focus on the 2024 marketing playbook strategies for the new age of marketing. For those who may not be familiar with our firm, Talentfoot, our mission is to enable organizations to drive sustainable growth by helping leaders recruit and build high-performing marketing, sales, and technology teams. With the evolving digital world we live in today, marketing seems to be moving at a rapid rate. I'm getting a lot of questions on a regular basis from CEOs, presidents, boards, investors who are trying to wrap their head around marketing, let alone us marketers trying to stay on top of all of the trends that seem to be evolving by the day. So before we get into the real juicy conversation, I'd love to start with introducing our esteemed panelists. We have three world-class CMOs with us today, and each bring a wealth of expertise that will enlighten us on the strategies shaping the marketing landscape in 2024. Let's start with Pat McLean. Pat is a seasoned marketing and digital transformation executive with over 25 years experience. Pat serves as the current interim CMO of Empower Pharmacy. He's been recognized for innovation, has held key roles at TD Bank and Walgreens, and has been recognized by both Business Insider's 27 most influential CMOs and Campaign US's 50 trailblazing marketers list. Thank you for being with us, Pat.
Thanks, Camille.
Next, we have Alicia Azali. Alicia is a transformative force in marketing. As the former chief marketing officer of American Family Insurance, Alicia led marketing strategies for a $14 billion portfolio. With impactful roles at Fortune 100 companies and a commitment to diversity and advocacy, she's been recognized with industry accolades, including the American Advertising Federation's Hall of Achievement. Delighted to have you, Alicia.
Thank you, Camille. Happy to be here.
Last but certainly not least, please welcome Matt Klein. With over 25 years of strategic leadership, Matt Klein currently serves as the Managing Director and Chief Marketing Officer at North Highland, overseeing key functions including marketing, communications, sales enablement, sales operations, and IT. A graduate from Emory University and Duke's University Fuqua School of Business, Matt's career has been defined by pioneering go-to-market strategies and customer-centric initiatives, resulting in sustained top and bottom line growth. Thank you all for being here. And Matt, that is quite a mouthful.
It is.
Before we jump in, I'm not sure, can any of the other panelists here, can you see the live chat? Before we jump in, I was hoping that all of the attendees, if you could put in the chat your title and industry, that would be really helpful to the panelists so we can get an idea of who's in the audience. From our understanding, from my fabulous marketing team, I believe about 70% of the audience is at the senior director level and above, but just some clarity around who's with us live here, that would be super helpful, and just some industry context. Can the panelists see the active chat?
I can see a comment that says, great panel, looking forward to hearing your perspectives.
Okay, so Anna, if there's anything you can do on the front of the live chat, that would be great. All right, well, let's jump in. So obviously, we're all being faced with navigating a very complex and challenging global economic climate. In the light of this past year's economic challenges, how do you recommend marketers approach the upcoming year? What strategies are you focusing on, and how are you mitigating risk or capitalizing on the market rebound? Matt, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, Camille.
Great.
Maybe as a quick level set, so North Highland is a consulting firm, so we tend to help our client base with some of their greatest challenges. So as you might imagine, our clients who are in all different industries face different challenges at different points in time. One of the stats that I've seen of late that I think is pretty interesting was done by Source Global, And basically CMOs, heads of marketing, about 77% of them said, or of us said, we had more ambition as we looked at 2023 and what we were hoping to accomplish. But 84% of us said the economic climate would actually reduce our confidence in being able to achieve it. So I share that because I think part of it is right-sizing our expectations and being more agile in the way we approach the year. I'd say more than at any point in the last decade, at least, the way we plan marketing, the way we focus on the year has to be agile. It's not going to be baked. It's not going to be static. It has to constantly move and shift and focus on where we think the growth will be as some of our sectors are navigating more challenging times. What that requires, and I'm sure we'll talk about this throughout the hour, is greater understanding, greater proclivity with data, with understanding what the leading indicators of that growth will be and where we see things shrinking, where perhaps we want to move our priorities or focus away from. The other things I would just throw out there as ideas are a real well-defined backlog of priority investments as and when or where growth returns, so that we know where we want to lean in and where we want to deploy investment. We've certainly deployed a number of much shorter planning sprints. So historically, we've all done the annual, then the semi-annual, maybe quarterly planning. We're doing that on a bi-weekly or monthly basis at this point and redeploying our investment. That requires us to be less, or I should say less of our budget locked into long-term investments and more fungible investments program spend that we could redeploy. Finally, the last thing I would say, Camille, is we're definitely, I would say, ramping up more focus on account-based marketing type of programs, more targeted programs at our existing client base to expand our footprint, and a little bit less of that broad-based awareness that we have found maybe gets lost in a little bit of the noise of what our client base is experiencing through some of these economic challenges.
Very helpful. So if I'm a brand marketer in the room, I'm getting a little nervous because everything that you're focused on, right, is around performance and making changes bi-weekly, right?
Yeah.
That's intense, right? And so it's all about the measurement, looking at the data, making insights, drawing insights from that data, making changes. Any words of wisdom? You know, is marketing just moving much more heavily towards the everything performance has to be measured? There needs to be data behind it.
Yeah, and I'm sure many of us on the call would say that's not necessarily a move, but it's a continued leaning in. You know, maybe my advice would be embrace the uncertainty. So that's the world we live in. That's the new normal. So this need for real-time insight and what's working obviously is critical. But as you have that insight, what are the programs, right? How are you going to lean in, and how are you going to best experiment with what's working and what's not? I'd say the other element of it, Camille, is how we all show up as leaders of our functional areas, because this change as an ever-present constant, I think, requires our folks to show up, operate, interact with the rest of their organizations in a very different way.
Yeah, great, very helpful. So stay nimble, everyone, right?
Stay nimble, yes.
Wonderful. Alicia, Pat, is there anything from your perspective you'd like to add as it relates to the challenging global economic climate as marketers today?
Well, I would just maybe pick up on a couple of themes from Matt. I mean, I couldn't agree more that now's the time to lean into measurements, just understand the return in particular of what it is you're investing. I think you know, for me, trying to develop the relationship with the finance organization and the CFO, where the connection between a dollar spent on marketing and the return you see on the business has never been more important. I think that's always been there. But I think when the economy softens and when the economic climate becomes more challenging, organizations that look at marketing as an expense line, I think it's just such a dangerous place to be. And I firmly believe that as a CMO and a senior marketing leader, a big part of the job is to articulate the value of marketing and put it in the terms of the business. And you know, we obviously investments in brand and awareness are important, particularly, you know, for younger brands or for brands that are, you know, thinking, you know, more long term. But I think these days, the expectation is that, the old saying of, well, I don't know, 50% of the marketing's working and 50% of it isn't, I just don't know which, that's just unacceptable now, right? So I really think now's the time, if you haven't got that discipline and if you haven't got that relationship into finance, now's the time to invest in it, so that when things do turn around and if we get back to growth scenarios, you've got a plan and you've got, hey, you give me X number of dollars, I'll deliver, this much to the top line, which flows through to this much at the bottom line. And, continue to challenge yourself, right? I mean, in times of challenge or even retraction, it doesn't mean you have to go into a shell, right? Like, now's the time to try some things on a smaller scale, experiment, learn, just keep challenging yourself, because like I say, there's going to come a moment where all of a sudden we're getting back to growth, and who they're going to turn to? They're going to turn to the marketers. So you better be ready. And now's the time to get ready.
I love it. Well said. Keep learning, right? And a model that we live by here at the firm is test and learn, test and fail before you test and scale, right? And I think that's something we look for in prospective talent in general. I would also say we tend to separate the performers in marketing from some of the pretenders, from a sense of who's built a profit center as opposed to a cost center. Right. And so everything you just shared, Pat, it's so important for marketing leaders to prove that you have built and are building a profit center. And that's what CEOs, boards, investors are looking for. Right. Alicia, anything to add from your perspective?
Just to maybe put a bow on it, all marketing should be performance marketing. And so the concept of, is it performance? Is it brand building? I think we should just throw out the window. All marketing should perform. And that requires an understanding of the value marketing plays to the business. And that requires that relationship Pat's been talking about. So I think that might just, to put a finer pin on it, all marketing is performance marketing, whether that be strengthening the brand from an awareness standpoint or deliver an experience down to a sale.
Beautifully said. Thank you for that bow.
Camille, can I add one thing on top
Sure.
of what Pat said, which I thought was really interesting around the finance relationship, the CFO relationship. One of the things that I think has been really critical and where we've been able to continue to invest is we also have other folks telling that same story to finance. So it's not just finance or CFO or CEO, rather, hearing it from CMO or marketing leaders, but we're hearing it from the other functions, from the other kind of front office sellers, on how critically important marketing is to their growth aspirations and the plan they're signing up for in 2024.
Well said. And we're seeing the level of importance for marketing and sales and technology to show that they are aligned with the overall business strategy, right? And it's a complaint that we're hearing from the top, that these three functional areas in particular, marketing tends to be probably marketing and sales tends to be more aligned these days, from what I'm hearing, than technology. And we're hearing a lot of trends in 2024 that we really have to get the technology leaders and technology teams aligned with the business strategy. But that's a really great point, Matt. All right, let's transition to the adapting consumer behaviors. So what are the key changes you're seeing in consumer behaviors? And how should this really adapt 2024 marketing and efforts as we move forward, knowing that the landscape of how consumers digest content, how they purchase goods, it's all changed pretty dramatically over the last year in particular.
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Go ahead,
and
Alicia.
A few thoughts, and then I know there are others will have some, but we've talked about being consumer centric for years and years and years as marketers, but being customer obsessed, I think, is really what's required, just because of how fast perceptions are changing. So I'd love to just share a few of those things, and again, I know my peers will also be able to add some value here. I'm gonna talk about it in a theme of three, but it all can be summed up with the idea of yes and so consumers are really looking for their cake and eat it too, if you will. From a value perspective, the insight here is I'm looking to save, but I'm also willing to splurge where it makes sense too. And so this shows up with consumers being willing to spend on big items that provide immediate gratification or experience. And so the implication here is, how can we as marketers think of ways to add personalized value in the lives of consumers, either emphasizing how saving in one purchase creates space to splurge or somewhere else, or that personalized brand experience to help deepen that relationship. Speaking of experience, from that perspective, consumers want to shop everywhere and all at once. And so in a McKinsey study, consumers are shopping in at least 3 different channels all at the same time, and consumer expectations are higher than ever. This makes customer journeys even more complex, and that makes it hard for brand marketers to design, deliver, and maintain experiences that meet customer needs, especially if you've got an older sort of tech-based industry. Fin services is really sort of going through this as we speak. And so the implication here is to focus on those experiences, those journeys that are the most valuable to your brand, and then build upon those over time versus trying to boil the ocean and make little progress over time. And sort of the third consumer trend for 2024, again, all under this theme of yes, and I'm buying from big trustworthy brands, and I'm also experimenting with new brands. And so, of course, traditionally, those big brands have dominated, especially during economic uncertainty, as we saw during the pandemic. But we're also seeing impulse buying and trying new brands. I saw the other day some laundry pods that use Clint Eastwood's son as and sort of sexualized laundry detergent. And I've always been a Tide user, but I almost bought these things. And so how do we think about new ways to connect and position brands? From a big brand standpoint, that means we've got to get more proximate to those smaller niche players that might be stealing share in a small way, but really unearthing what sits behind that. How are they getting consumers to move? Because it can be a source of value creation for your brand.
So love all of that. It makes perfect sense, especially as I'm thinking about my own consumer habits, right? So you're talking a lot about psychographics, right? So you have to really know your customer, right? And what gets them to tick. Yep. So I think a lot of brands struggle. They don't do and we had a Lewis in the chat. He mentioned the importance of market research, right? And I think it's that foundation of the research is so critical to execute on the personalized brand experience that you just shared, Alicia, right?
Absolutely. And it's research, and thanks for the comment, Lewis, in the traditional sense of market research, but it's also listening to your calls. It's also going through the experience itself. It's also social listening. And so being proximate and really close to customers is not just, some qual or quant study, although it's that too. It's not just your NPS score, although it's that too. It's being close to their lives and what's on their minds and what's sort of occupying their thoughts and keeping them up at night that can help you better serve and delight them in this idea of being customer obsessed.
I love it. Some of the best marketers I've worked with over the years, when they're trying to land that dream job, they will ensure that they go experience the brand if they have that option, right? They will go to the store. They will go online and make a purchase. And so, it's that undercover boss mentality, right? And what you're saying, Alicia, is that undercover boss mentality should never stop.
Never. I love that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Pat, anything from your perspective as it relates to consumer behavior?
Yeah, I think we're seeing and we'll continue to see a joke. It's like a return to the physical world, right? Like I feel like we've all been living in this little world here for the last 2.5, 3 years. But what you're seeing is, even just look at recent numbers with like Black Friday, e-commerce sales actually was down year over year. But overall retail sales is up. So what does that mean? It means people are going back to the physical store, right? They're going back to the mall. They're going back, to have an experience around shopping that's not just, on the laptop or on the mobile device or whatever. And so, you also look at concerts and sporting events. And I mean, the biggest thing this year was we had Taylor Swift to open our session today. I mean, the Eras tour was massive. And even like when it was showing in movie theaters, people flocked to the movie theater. So I think you're seeing this like balancing people's worlds, right? Where before we've seen lots of trends of back to the office, at least, a couple days a week or 3 days a week. More and more companies are getting back to that physical interaction. And so I think there's a mentality shift there for people where, you got to balance the investments that you're making in digital and e-commerce with, don't lose sight of the fact that people still, value especially if you're a retailer or somebody who has a physical footprint, that's still going to be a part of the experience. And, you got to make sure that you're not, underwhelming people in that environment. And I think the demands are so high now, as Alicia was saying, like, you just expect the whole experience to be perfect. You expect this blend of your experience physically with a brand to be connected to the digital experience. So this idea of omni-channel, I think, is really, really important. And I think you're going to see people crave more and more social interaction, crave more and more, let's get out of the house, let's go see the world again. All that, I think, is going to really amp up even more so in 2024. And we just have to be aware of it, right? Because we've been living in a digital bubble, I think, for the last 3 years, and it's time to get back to just a valuable omni-channel, digital and physical combo, if you will, in terms of the way we approach customers.
Beautiful. Makes a lot of sense. And you're seeing companies like Crate and Barrel, right, that are creating these living rooms where people can spend half of their day there and drinking coffee, and right. So you're seeing a lot of retailers move in that direction, Pat.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it's really the yes and. I want to be in person, but while I'm there, I better be able to pick up my phone and find that same product in the exact, size, shape, color, et cetera, that I want. But also be able to have that experience. So customers, again, are really, really demanding now.
Agreed. All right.
Self-included.
So AI obviously has been a hot topic throughout, I guess, since this time last year, right? We're going on about 13, 14 months since ChatGPT was rolled out to the world. I'm curious, we're getting a lot of questions around AI and what does that mean for marketing? We work for a lot of agencies, right? And they're getting nervous around CMOs like yourself determining whether or not they can bring resources in-house and or really just trim on cost when it comes to AI. And of course, there's a lot of marketers that are telling us, well, gosh, my work is fairly redundant. Does that mean that I could get replaced by a robot? So Pat, could you kick us off with your perspective on the future of marketing as it relates to AI?
Yeah, well, first of all, I am a robot. So I mean, this is what's sort of happening now, right? Well, I think it's great that we're hitting this topic head on, because obviously just a ton of promise and a ton of hype here. I mean, you look at some of the bigger tech company valuations, and just a lot of it recently is being driven by this topic, and rightfully so. Are we at the time when the marketer's job is going to go away? I don't believe so. I think the marketer's job is just changing, as it's always been changing, right? And I think this trend has been happening for a while. I think AI has become, a more prominent topic probably in the last year, but I think everything that's happened really over the last 5 to 10 years around more marketing technology, more targeting technology, more use of data, to make the experience more personalized for customers. I mean, all of that is the foundation, I think, on which AI is built. And so now we're entering into this next phase where automation, more efficiency, AI, become the next wave of being able to be, really, really personal, really, really relevant with the customer without it involving a lot of human intervention. Now, does that mean there's going to be no human intervention? I don't believe so. I believe AI is a layer of tools that the marketer is going to have to be able to be more efficient in reaching customers. And so what will happen is that the marketer who knows and can use AI will become better than the marketer who is not comfortable and does not understand the use of AI. And so I think it's got massive implications for education and training and just, marketing acumen, where the expectations of the marketer is that they're understanding how to use these tools and how to use them. Back to our conversation about the relationship with the CFO, how do we make the right investments in AI? How do we make the right investments in marketing that leverages AI to create greater return for the organization, right? And that is the mentality that the marketer has to have going into this next phase. I think marketing technology is going to take a massive leap forward as AI starts to get implemented as a next layer on top of the stacks that we already have. So you got to be on top of this stuff. I mean, this is really, really critical, and it's going to happen fast. The amount of investment going into this space is massive. And so you got to be on top of it. You got to stay relevant and use the tools yourselves. If you don't have a ChatGPT account, if you're not using it in some way, shape, or form in your job today, you're missing a massive opportunity to self-learn and become self-aware about what you don't know, which is how you're going to be able to leverage this technology in your day-to-day jobs in the next decade plus. And so it's coming, and it's coming fast. So learn so that you stay relevant and that you can leverage these tools as quickly as they become available. That's my advice.
Well said. So embrace the change, right? And find ways for it to drive efficiency within your teams and in your workflow to future-proof yourself, right? And you said it perfectly, Pat, right? You're not going to get replaced by a robot, but you will get replaced by someone who leverages the robot.
Exactly.
Amen.
Matt, anything from your perspective
Yeah.
on this?
We talked a little bit about the importance of the relationships with the C-suite. I mean, AI as a topic is top of the charts for CEOs, for all of the executive leadership team that we're speaking with. So there's a bit of a credibility play on being not just conversant, but leaning in and thinking strategically around, hey, how can AI better enable what we're trying to do from a marketing or demand generation or growth perspective? Completely agree with you, Camille. AI is not taking the job away, but a marketer who uses it will. And so this, the question is around how does this affect our planning in 2024? It affects it in every possible way. So there's an element of, yes, we want to take off some of the repeatable tasks so we can focus on maybe more of the strategic, or in some cases, do more with less or with the same. But where we're really focusing is how do we get into a greater level of personalization across our client base through AI, right? And that's whether it's communications, content, thought leadership in many regards, proposals, you name it, it runs the gamut. But really, I think level setting on expectations in a couple of ways. Number one, this is a great way in many cases to start with something other than a blank page. So you're not going to get the 100% answer, but it's going to allow our marketers to have something to start with and to be more effective and efficient. That's a really, I think, big opportunity for us. It's also going to require that we start to, quote unquote, train our stakeholders, our internal customers, on how to work differently, right? So for example, I have a design team, as many of you would. They are fantastic at building a lot of graphic designs that our broader workforce of consultants can leverage. Well, we have to continue doing that, but the yes and, to pick up on what Alicia said earlier, is, and we actually have to also think in this new world of how do we train the types of prompts our workforce will have to use to build their own graphic design elements. And then how do we start to think about the way in which we're going to create consistency across the brand? So the immediate pressure point that we're going to really feel this year is this operating in both worlds to a greater degree, what feels like slowing down in order to speed up. And I think one of the things that we're really focused on as we navigate this interesting dynamic is how do we get very focused on those areas where we are experimenting? Because we could go off in 100 different directions, but there's a lot of talk of task forces and things of that nature. How do we say, all right, let's focus on a few things where we can really lean in on a fixed period of time with very fixed and clear objectives on what we're looking to test or experiment with, and then decide whether we scale.
I love that.
Camille, the only one, I'm sorry.
No, please.
I just want to, I love Pat and Matt's comments. I also just want to bring the topic of, acknowledging that there is bias in some of the data, and making sure that, what we are accelerating through using this technology, we might also be putting a lot of power in saying yes or no to some of the outputs to a human, and recognizing that where the data is coming from, there's bias there, right? And so we have to ask ourselves, who is represented in the data? Is it the entire population? Are there folks whose voices, don't exist, or they're misrepresented in the data? And so just that element needs to be top of mind for CMOs as well, given our role is to really, again, be obsessed with the people that we serve, our customers, and not leave anyone behind as we make forward steps in using this technology.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, Alicia. And it's not just bias, it's like inaccuracies, falsehoods, just like incorrect information. So the underlying, I think two things on that. One is the underlying data and information that you're pulling from needs to be accurate and correct. And then also that's why you need humans, right? You can't just let the machine work. You need, I sometimes use the analogy of air traffic controllers, right? You can't just, as sophisticated as our airline, tracking system is, you can't just let it work. You still need to be monitoring and watching because things happen, right? And so you have to keep an eye on the machine and make sure that, at the end of the day, the human is making the decision when it really, really matters.
Well said. I wanted to offer to the audience, feel free to, if you have any questions that are bubbling up for you, feel free to drop any questions in the chat, and I will do my best to get the questions to our panelists and field as many as we can. All right. So let's move on to what this means for the future of a marketing organization and the future of a marketing team. With all of this technology changing rapidly, with artificial intelligence at the forefront of driving efficiency, right? A lot of CMOs and marketing professionals, as well as just business leaders, they're trying to figure out, what does this mean for a marketing organization in 2024? I've got this work chart, this organizational chart now. How should I be evolving it? Where should I be fine-tuning things, retooling teams, team members, resources, etc.? So if Alicia, if you want to kick us off, that would be great.
Sure. And I may just start us off kind of high level, and again, would love to hear Matt and Pat's thoughts here. Because when I think about org structure, I first want to take a step back and make sure teams are really, really clear how marketing drives value for the organization. Sometimes if you inherit a team, you're sort of encouraged to just make minor tweaks. But I think the first step is making sure your commitment to, your business partners, your CEO of the organization, on defining what marketing does to drive value in your organization is step number one. Again, it should be done with a broad set of stakeholders. It's not just done by your marketing team. And it's not really a discussion on org structure at first. It's getting clear on the role that marketing plays and how they drive value. And so then once you've aligned on how marketing drives value within the organization, then you think about what are those priority accountabilities and capabilities to drive the value. Again, for me, it's very principled and it's very broad in terms of the stakeholders that are enrolled in this process, so that you're clear on how you add value and what are those key capabilities to drive the value. And then the last piece of it is the who. It's the talent and the teams and the capabilities that do that work. And so you would create an org design that keeps you as the CMO closest to the capabilities that are most impacting the growth of today and tomorrow, right? And so what does this mean? If your marketing priority is to deliver exceptional digital experience, those teams should not be buried within your organization 3 layers down. Right. And so kind of going through that process around defining the value, what are those capabilities cross-functionally, and having the most valuable sort of role and capabilities most proximate to you as a leader, or not buried within the organization, thinking more horizontally. That's, the first few thoughts I'd add to this topic.
Wonderful. So it's all about aligning the marketing with the business strategy, right? And how can we serve that business strategy to meet its goals, right? Achieve the results that we're looking to accomplish as a greater organization.
especially just given how fast the pace of change is for the remit of a CMO and the expectations of what marketing does for an organization. It's just changed so much over the past few years that starting there first, to me, helps avoid misunderstandings around what expectations are of a CMO and their organizations. And so, regardless if you're 3 years in or you're starting off with a new team, that clarity will help ensure that your teams are focused on the places where marketing can add the most value and growth for your organization.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Pat, Matt?
I'm happy to jump in. I guess the phrase coming to mind for me on the evolution is integration on steroids. So I think we've all been touching on the fact that we need to integrate and work more closely with other parts of the organization. I've been fortunate that for the past several years, IT sort of is within my responsibility as well. And we've really seen the benefit of some of those lines between marketing and IT blurring, and the way we can start to think about adopting technology and better serving our client base, internal or external. One of the other areas that I'm involved with is I lead what we call our internal transformation office, but essentially it's a series of agile cross-functional teams tackling kind of business critical topics or initiatives. And what we've learned from that is we've seen a lot of success, even with part-time capacity, where we've created these cross-functional horizontal, so kind of end-to-end, if you will, from product through activation in some cases, durable teams. And that has become more of our normal way of working. So when I think of my marketing organization, we're seeing more and more, very intentionally, cross-functional pods that are becoming a little bit of the informal structure of the organization. And it's made up of folks within my remit and outside very intentionally. So we're starting to create that kind of shared business objectives and co-creation. And in many respects, it's, we've sort of positioned that as demand generation more than marketing, so others can see themselves in that. That has also allowed us to very intentionally start to bring in, as a consulting firm, we have the luxury of tapping into a lot of data and digital capability across the workforce, bringing that in so that we're building that into the marketers who can then sort of amplify it within the work that we're doing. So I'd say, maybe directly answering your question, Camille, the structure becomes more fluid. The lines become more blurred intentionally, and we're bringing together the right individuals, the right skill sets in order to create what feels like more of an enterprise approach to marketing in many respects.
I think it's fantastic. So there's something we talk about often here, and it's the Talentfoot growth triangle. And we have marketing, sales, and technology, right? And so we're in the business of finding marketers that understand sales and tech. We're in the business of finding technologists who understand marketing and sales leaders who understand marketing and tech, and bringing those three functional areas together. If they don't understand each other's worlds, it's really hard to integrate, right? Or you can integrate, but how successful is it going to be, right? And then people, ops, and data sitting at the center of those three areas of business, right? So this is why I love bringing B2B and B2C marketers together as well, right? Because your approach to these mighty, nimble, integrated teams is fascinating. I haven't heard a lot of B2C marketers doing the same.
Yeah, I would just add one thought. I think everything that's been said is right, and we tend to think a lot about the data analytics and the targeting and the ROI on all of our return, but we can't forget about the art of it all, right? So I think what sometimes gets lost is we spend most of our day in the left side of our brain, right? But you can't forget that in a lot of times the marketer is the most creative person in the company, right? So you have to maintain the soul and the empathy and the closeness to the customer and all that kind of stuff. So I tend to be very protective of those parts of the organization, because sometimes they can get overlooked in times when we're trying to get more efficient. And so we've got to make sure that we're keeping the role that we play as the emphatic voice of the customer and the creative, and let's make sure that we're showing up the way we want to show up. All that still needs to be a part of the organization and have a strong voice at the table in midst of all the math.
Pat, it's interesting. One of the challenges we had historically is at times our, let's call it customer facing consultants or customer facing folks were not showing up as creatively as we would desire, as boldly, right? And oftentimes we're providing really fresh perspective, different solutions to a very challenging problem our clients are facing. So the reverse is also true. What we've actually seen over the past year is we're starting to embed some of the more creative skill sets into these teams to influence, some folks that are a little bit more, let's say, math or numbers centric, to show up differently, to operate differently, to start to think about what creativity means in the context of the customer experience that they're creating. So, it is maybe a little bit slower moving, but it sort of works in both directions as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense
about the creative side.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, your pod model is great because you should be challenging the creative people to understand the data and the math, and you should be challenging your math people to understand why it's important, to spend time on the empathy and the creative stuff. So, it's all becoming so integrated that, the idea of just being, a one, type, a one archetype in the marketing model is really challenging these days.
Yes.
And those on the analytical side, right, the left brain, they're driving strategy for the right brains, right? So we all need each other, right?
Sure.
Jordan asked.
You're making me think about my last job was in the insurance space, and thinking about marketing our actuarial talent. So that's a real crashing together of left and right brains for sure.
No kidding. Sure. No kidding. Jordan asked a great question. So there's obviously been a lot of discussion around data. It can be pretty overwhelming, the amount of data we're collecting, right, these days. How do you segment what data matters and what's just excess, right? Like it's just too much and we don't need it. What's on your minds, CMOs today?
It's a great question. I mean, you got to find the right insights talent to help you sift through it, right? I mean, this is where the whole discussion around the art and the science of it all. I mean, there's analytics and then there's insight, and insight is where the power is, right? And so, I think it's a real talent in a marketing executive who can be able to, sift through all the numbers and get to the numbers that matter. And it's different for every business. I the ones that tend to stick out for me are the ones that are based in, hard experimentation, where it's almost like indisputable, right? And so I think that test and learn, experiment mentality is right, because otherwise it's all, it all just blurs together. And then the other numbers that tend to stick out to me are the numbers that are the closest to the customer. And, even sifting through like NPS and customer sat and getting, down to like, what's underneath those high level numbers and getting into the ones that really tell the story. It's hard work. But, when you do the hard work, there's so much that can hide under an NPS or a customer sat macro number, right? And until you're able to get underneath the hood, it's hard to know exactly, what's really happening. And so I tend to go pretty deep on those numbers. And then, like I said, on the ROI, just make sure your experiments are set up well. Otherwise it just becomes, you're still guessing.
That's I think hopefully provides a lot of clarity to the audience who is feeling overwhelmed by all this data. And my biggest takeaway from that, Pat, is focus on the data first that's closest to the customer, and then worry about the other sets of data. But test and learn against those other sets of data for you to really draw insights onto where you should be prioritizing your time and resources.
Yeah. The only other thing I would add, at the risk of stating the obvious, is, because there's so much we could all analyze and look at, we tried to bucket, is it leading or lagging? And then are they metrics that I care about running my function and sort of the efficacy of that? Or are there metrics around driving the growth of the business? And
That's
those have different strategies and how we best filter out the noise and experiment to figure out where we focus on. So that last category, really there's a lot more collaboration around what types of metrics would resonate and align with the objectives of their selling and growth teams, so that we can focus on those collectively as a business, as an enterprise. And those tended to be a lot more, let's call it engagement centric, and really trying to get down to that metric that is kind of the root cause ultimately of, are we growing or not? A very simple example is number of meetings during the course of a pursuit. We found there was magic once you get above a certain number where you'd actually start to see much stronger conversion. So we really tried to distill it down and really thought less is more, particularly in those categories outside of just running our own function.
And hence the rise of Rev Ops today, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yep.
Any words of wisdom on the Rev Ops front, Matt, in terms of what you're seeing in the B2B landscape?
Yeah. And that phrase can mean different things in different places. So, and here we have sort of sales operations and sales enablement functions that have elements of both. What I would say is, and we have had sales ops now for 5-6 years, it has completely shifted the narrative and the conversation that we're having around growth. So if I were to be extreme, prior to having a more mature revenue operations function, there was tremendous debate around what metrics matter, what's right, what is the data, and we were just debating data. And so the greatest benefit to revenue operations, and we did this cross-functionally, was we defined a list of like, what are we measuring and what are those indicators of growth collectively, so we no longer debate that, and we can report in a very consistent way. The other thing maybe on revenue ops that I think is a bigger unlock and a bigger really critical moment for us in our growth trajectory was a shift off of, to Pat's point, data to insight, and really focusing on leading insights so we can understand when to inject ourselves in the context of a pursuit, whether it's a specific opportunity or just a relationship, and what type of guidance, counsel, coaching, tools, assets can we deploy at the exact moment in time that is most relevant where they are in that pursuit. And so revenue ops for us has been the ability to do that effectively and at scale. Mm-hmm. And so there was another question in chat around favorite AI tools. Like one of them for us has been people.ai, and being able to more effectively scrape Outlook and different things and bring that into Salesforce so that we could have that type of insight and be more effective in injecting guidance, coaching, perhaps a different path than we otherwise would have previously.
Fantastic. Thank you for that insight. It's an evolving skill set and role that a lot of organizations are trying to wrap their head around right now, and how to deploy it, right?
Yep, and your model is going to have to change continuously. I know from our revenue ops, it's the algorithm and the way we forecast growth shifts. It's different by industry, it's different by sector, and certainly it has changed quite a bit through the pandemic and some of these macroeconomic challenges that we've been facing.
And thank you for sharing, Matt, the people.ai. Alicia, Pat, are there any other AI tools that are either on your short list of favorites or that is being discussed quite often in the landscape of marketing today, or maybe just personally?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using ChatGPT quite regularly for a variety of different things, everything from job descriptions to, draft press releases to, internal communications, all kinds of stuff. And it's, it obviously, it can get you started, but, you obviously need to tweak it to yourself, but it's just a great tool to just get yourself going on a lot of those. And we've been using it for content creation, as well, that winds up in our marketing activity. But, I think there's an element of caution in our business in particular, because we're in such a heavily regulated industry, that the use of this, back to the point around just making sure that the integrity of the content is so crucial. I'm a little wary of it, just because, if you're talking about a drug, for example, there can be a lot of misinformation that first of all, can be a compliance issue, but also can misinform a customer about something that's pretty important. So I would say in our business, we're definitely on the more cautious side at the moment. I would also say that tools that have been out there for a while that do intelligent content rendering, I think is really good. Company called Movable Ink that maybe people have used. Phrasey is another one that are point executions where in particular environments they're rendering personalized content based on data and intelligence. And I think those have been, a little more advanced, but they're still point executions. So I think the next phase of this is automation across channel and some of the other things we talked about, which will be the next wave of all this. But those are some examples of what I've used recently.
Excellent. All right. Dan Smith, who's also a CMO, a fabulous one as well. He asked a great question. He's curious how everyone is thinking about growth in 2024 and planning for growth. So are you expecting to grow from new customer generation and acquisition or more share of wallet? And anything around, exploring new product offerings for expansion. What's on your mind in terms of where you believe you're going to be, marketers and yourself are going to be able to drive growth and what you're planning to focus on around growth next year?
Happy to jump in. For us, again, B2B consulting firm, I would say, 85-90% of our growth is within our existing universe of clients. So the clients that we've done business with over the past 12 to 24 months. So that's really our focus, and we're typically working in the Fortune 500. So it's oftentimes a matter of selling new services to new buyers within a given logo, if you will. From a product perspective, I would say it's probably 75% existing products. We are doing some inorganic. We recently acquired a strategic portfolio management tool, for example. So through acquisition, we're starting to see an expansion of our product suite and bringing that oftentimes again to the existing client base.
Beautiful. Anybody else? Otherwise, we've got 2 other questions and then it's a wrap. No? All right.
Let's move on. Yeah.
All right. So we've been talking about a lot of different topics. I've taken some notes, great takeaways. But if you were to give our audience one critical element or strategy that you believe will be crucial for the success of marketing in 2024, what do you believe that is? And if you can provide any context as to why, that would be great too. Go ahead, Alicia.
We've been spending so much time talking about how much marketing has changed and what's new. And I would say, what's tried and true is the people that do, that are the hearts of our marketing work and teams. And I know folks have probably seen engagement surveys, and Gallup is reporting that employees are more stressed now than ever, despite changes in pay and changes in title. And so for me, the remedy for this is really leadership, and in particular, leading with empathy. It's leading with both head and the heart. It's leading with being curious and decisive and humble and confident. And so, the takeaway or the theme for this group of leaders is really getting back to leadership as well. And so just as much as we want to be experts in the technology and keep the pulse of the change, we have to make sure we're creating space for our employees to learn, right? That we're prioritizing their learning, that we're prioritizing their development, whether that be in person or hybrid. So being straightforward, even around the most difficult topics. And so leadership and leading with empathy, taking care of our teams, to me, that's something we haven't talked about and something that is like a non-negotiable sort of skill set for 2024.
Oh man, love that.
For me, I won't repeat some of the AI and tech, but I think one of the big shifts for us is our key competition is no longer the traditional set of competitors. It's not the other consultancy. It's actually the cost of inaction. It's our clients not pursuing what it is they need, oftentimes impacted by what they're experiencing in the economy. So that's forcing us to think differently and lean in differently on stated and unstated needs, the consequences of inaction, getting better and more crisp at how we articulate the value that we've delivered for clients. So kind of more on that than it is the value of the relationship for our enterprise, sort of maybe more traditional client sat, the impact for them.
Yeah, for me, I use the term capability building. I think that part of it is people and developing people, right? Because that's a big part of how you get the work done and how you be great. But it's also the technology, it's the data, it's making sure that the experience is where it needs to be. And that's all like really hard foundational work that I think marketers are being asked to do more and more. Because when you build those capabilities, then you can scale. And you can be more efficient and you can get more done. And so for me, I think this is a time to be looking at those building blocks of what's going to make a great, scalable marketing model, and making sure that those are all in place so that when, things start to turn around and we get back to growth agenda, that, all that's in place and ready to go.
Well said. Well said. All that foundation building, right? So, all right, a little fun at the end here. You're in an elevator. There's not a lot of time before you need to get off that elevator, and you're in the elevator with one of our attendees in the audience today, and they turn to you and they ask you for a valuable piece of career advice. One valuable piece of career advice. What would that be? Matt, you want to start?
I would categorize it as systems thinking. I think to have the greatest impact on growth at your enterprise as a CMO, you have to function and show up as a leader of the business, not as a leader of the function.
Beautiful. Alicia?
I'm going to say bet on yourself. And that could look like, again, investing in development, investing in relationships, investing in people, but put yourself out there, try something new, bet on yourself.
Love it.
The biggest barrier to career growth is complacency. So just keep challenging yourself, try different things, and just go for it.
Wonderful. Have a growth mindset, right? Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for everyone this afternoon for joining us. And again, the chaos of December. And thank you to our amazing panelists. This was a really insightful conversation. It was really nice to see your collaboration in the room, and for all the attendees for your fabulous questions. I encourage everyone who attended to follow our panelists on LinkedIn and their company pages. And for anyone who may need assistance with their 2024 org chart or retooling your team, or needs compensation data for hiring needs, or anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out to our firm at info@talentfoot.com to schedule some time. And I'm wishing everybody a very happy, healthy new year ahead. And marketing 2024, let's make it a good year. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Camille.
Thank you, Camille.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Are you ready for it?